Before we begin, please imagine the bell notification is on and you're subscribed to Huna Stories. I sat in the second row, close enough to hear the soft mechanics of the room, the scrape of a chair leg, the rustle it exhibits being passed hand to hand, close enough to see my father's jaw set the way it always did when he believed he was right. He wore the same navy suit he saved for weddings and funerals, the one that made him look reliable to strangers. My mother sat beside him, hands folded, her smile precise. When she spoke, it carried without effort. "The 3 vacation homes in the Florida Keys are ours," she said as if she were confirming a reservation. "She doesn't deserve a cent." I noticed how easily the word deserve landed, as if it had been weighed and found accurate long before today. The judge listened without expression. He was older than I expected, his glasses perched low, eyes moving steadily from speaker to document to clock. He had the posture of someone who had learned not to rush. Time, after all, bent toward him. I wondered how many families he'd seen reassemble themselves into arguments. My father glanced back once, not at me exactly, but past me at the idea of me, the daughter who had moved away, the one who had stopped calling as often, the one whose name appeared in filings as a technicality. His pride wasn't sharp, it was smooth. It had been polished by years of believing outcomes were earned. I kept my hands still. I had practiced that when I was a child. My parents signed things for me without asking. Summer programs, bank accounts, a small trust I learned about only when it was convenient for them to mention it. "We're handling it," they'd say. "You don't need to worry." Worry was framed as ingratitude, silence as maturity. I learned early to make myself administratively small. The case moved forward with the clean efficiency of people who had rehearsed their position. Assets listed, timelines clarified. A narrative of stewardship presented like a ledger. I was not accused of anything explicitly. I was simply absent from the story they told. At one point, the judge asked if there were any additional materials to consider. My attorney stood. He was careful not to look at me when he spoke, as if acknowledgement might tip something fragile. "Yes, Your Honor, a letter submitted into evidence." The word letter felt heavier than it should have, not because of what it said, but because of what it represented, a refusal to remain procedural debris. I had written it late, after rereading old statements and emails that referred to me in the third person while I was still on the thread. I didn't describe my feelings. I didn't accuse. I documented dates, signatures, transfers that occurred while I was legally an adult, but functionally excluded. I explained how consent had been assumed rather than asked for, how access had been framed as irresponsibility. I remember stopping halfway through, wondering if this counted as betrayal, then realizing how trained that question was. The judge took the letter. He didn't read it aloud. He scanned it the way people scan things they expect to be dull. His eyes moved faster at first, then slowed. He leaned back slightly. There was a pause, just long enough for my mother's smile to stiffen. Then he laughed. Not lively, not cruelly. It was a short surprise sound, like recognition escaping before it could be managed. The room went still in that way that happens when power clears its throat. "Well," he said quietly, tapping the page once, "this is interesting." My father's face changed first. Color drained upward, leaving a pale coyote behind. My mother's hands tightened in her lap, her smile slipping into something unreadable. I watched them recalibrate the way people do when the rules they were certain of begin to rearrange themselves. The judge didn't scold, he didn't sermonize. He asked questions precise. Once about authority, about fiduciary responsibility, about the difference between managing assets for someone and managing them instead of someone. Each question was an invitation to explain a gap they hadn't known they needed to bridge. They answered carefully at first, then defensively, then less so. I felt something loosen in my chest. Not triumph, not relief exactly, more like a confirmation that the ground I'd been standing on wasn't imaginary. At one point, the judge looked at me directly, not with sympathy, with acknowledgement. "You were an adult when these decisions were made," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes," I replied. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. He nodded once, as if placing a marker. The ruling didn't hand me everything. It didn't punish them. It did something quieter and more disruptive. It recognized my standing. It required accounting. It froze certain transfers pending review. It named me as a participant rather than a footnote. My parents didn't look at me when it was over. They gathered their papers with the distracted urgency of people who have lost their script. My mother's mouth opened once as if to say something familiar, then closed again. There was no scene, no apology, just the awkward gravity of consequence settling where certainty had been. I stayed seated until the room thinned. When I stood, my legs trembled, not from fear, but from the unfamiliar effort of not folding myself away. Outside, the air felt sharper. I realized I had been holding my breath for years, mistaking it for composure. I don't know what our relationship will become. The distance between us now has a shape. It's not empty. It's defined by records and boundaries, and the knowledge that silence is not the same as consent. What I reclaimed wasn't the houses. It was authorship, the ability to say, I was here. I was not confused. I did not misunderstand. And I did not disappear just because it was convenient for you to believe I had. I walked down the steps without looking back, not because I was above it, but because for once I didn't need to be seen to exist.